please call us Monday through Friday at 232-4434.
Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we are going to have a discussion about the Palestinians again, but in a different light though, because in the last 5 years probably most of you have heard of the term Intifada, which basically it means to shake off, and but that term came to mean the Palestinian resistance, or to signify what took place in the last 5 years, even though the Intifada itself has probably, don't want to say that it has died, definitely it has not, but I think it took different roads than the roads were intended for it in the beginning. Our guest is going to be Ramzy Baroud, who is the editor-in-chief of the Palestinian Chronicle website. We will introduce Ramzy a little bit later, but before we jump into our subject for the night, which is the Palestinian Second Intifada as compared to the First Intifada, the dollar came crashing today. Actually, it has been crashing for a while, and if you are one of the people who have been watching this show for the last 4 years at least, we have told you on this show that we can probably destroy the whole world 10 times over, but one war that we definitely will lose is the economic war. Of course, you know, we have talked many times of why that particular war we can't win. But ladies and gentlemen, the dollar is tanking south big time, and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt very bad. It's going to hurt you in your pocket, in your future, in your children's future, and unfortunately, it has destroyed the American dream. The economy is in shambles. And we owe all this to George Bush, of course. He had a lot to do with it. He had a lot to do with why the dollar, even though he inherited a surplus, about $400 billion surplus, actually he inherited $250 billion surplus, and now we are many billions of dollars, many hundreds of billions of dollars deficit. The dollar today, ladies and gentlemen, was like $1.56. $1.56 would require you to buy €1. Many people in the world are turning to other currencies. Many people are getting away from the dollars. Many governments are getting away from the dollar. Many businesses are leaving the United States because when the money they make here, when they take that money to wherever they came from, they lose, even though they're showing, their bottom line is showing that they made money in the States, but when that investment is changed to other currencies, it's in the red. So, and again, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know if it's, now, of course, the dollar, this is not the first time that the dollar went down, but this is the only time that there is no sight of when ahead of when the dollar is going to stop this fall. And like I said, you know, if you had $100,000 in the bank, now they're probably worth, if you had that about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, now they are probably worth about $60,000. lot of people are moving into, that's why gold is so high. Gold hit 110, no, I'm sorry, $1,000, and oil hit 110. So you go figure. But anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, we will definitely be talking about the dollar and the economy, as we have talked about it many, many times, and we forewarned you many times before the mainstream media jumped on this that the dollar will tank, and that is the war that we will lose. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, because when you take $100 and go to the grocery store, you come up with only a couple of bags, not what it used to. $100 does not buy what it used to buy before. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Palestinian people normally in the Western media are portrayed as terrorists, cold-hearted murderers, and barbaric, violent people. Even though the Palestinians, all they want to do is they want to live in peace, just like anyone else in the world. But the media portrays the Palestinians as terrorists, and Israel as this nice little country of Jewish people who came out of the Holocaust, and all they just want to do is have a national home for their people, so nobody else will kill them like they killed them back during World War II. And that's all they want to do, is just live in peace, but the Palestinians would not let them live in peace. Well, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be speaking with Ramzy Baroud, who is a veteran Palestinian-American journalist and former Al Jazeera producer. Ramzy Baroud taught mass communications at Australia's Curtin University of Technology in Malaysia, I believe. And his work has been published in hundreds of newspapers and journals worldwide, including the Washington Post, the International Herald Tribune, the Christian Science Monitor, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Seattle Times, the Miami Herald, the Japan Time, and the Al-Ahram weekly, Egyptian weekly newspaper. He has been a guest, of course, on many, many television shows and programs, including CNN International, BBC, ABC Australia, National Public Radio, Al Jazeera, and many, many others. He wrote a book. The title of his book is The Palestinian Intifada, a chronicle of a people's struggle. The Second Palestinian Intifada, a chronicle of a people's struggle, is Ramzy Baroud's comprehensive account of the momentous events of the last 5 years, which shaped the political landscape not only of Palestine and Israel, but of the entire Middle East region, addressing the most controversial issues, including the alarming escalating in suicide bombings, which of course it has not really, we have not had many suicide bombings lately. We're going to discuss the suicide bombings with Ramzy, and we will shed more lights on who these suicide bombers are. And of course the construction of the separation wall, which Israel built, and we've talked about the wall, and we've shown you many, many pictures of the wall in previous programs, that is basically choking the lives out of the Palestinian population there in the West Bank and Gaza. He reports a huge rate of unemployment and hunger in the occupied territories, and statistics so critical that the NGOs compare their magnitude to African nations such as the Congo. From the brutality of the Israeli army to the ever-compromising nature of the Palestinian Authority, few are spared Baroud's thoughtful critique. The book is clear and concise, with one chapter dedicated to the major events of each year and includes comprehensive timeline. The book can be purchased, well, we're not going to say that because it's against the station's policy, but you can definitely go on our website and you will have information of how to get his book. I believe we do have Ramzy with us. Ramzy, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Hesham.
Thank you for coming on. Ramzy, the Palestinians are portrayed as terrorists, as bloodthirsty, cold-blooded murderers, and Israel as this nice little country who just wants to live in peace. Now, your book, you very much, and in your book, you talk about the Palestinians in the last 5 years, and I believe most people in the world have heard of what has been happening to the Palestinians in the last 5 years, especially in the last couple of months with what happened in Gaza. Let's dive into this. What has, now you call it the Second Palestinian Intifada. Is the Intifada still going on as we speak, or is this like a different phase of Intifada?
Well, thank you for this question. I do believe that various forms of Palestinian struggles have continued and perpetuated throughout the years since the inception of that struggle in the mid-20s of the last century until today. So in reality, if Intifada means struggle, the Intifada is one and it never stopped. However, these kind of terminologies we have, the first Intifada and the second Intifada, is mostly pertinent to modern news categorization, if you will, which defines a particular event where a collective stance is taken by the people, the Palestinian people, and it is supposedly a spontaneous collective stance for freedom and for justice. From that definition point of view, the Intifada has ceased to exist, from my opinion, because the Intifada was hijacked in later years, and the Intifada, and unfortunately, and the energies of the Palestinian people were diverted rather to another struggle, and that's an internal strife between various Palestinian factions, some rightfully and others not. But as a collective struggle, a collective mass struggle against the Israeli occupation, the Palestinians have reverted to their continuous struggle of the past, but it's no longer the main focus, unfortunately, of much of the Palestinian energies in the occupied territories.
Now, Ramzy, it doesn't really matter. I mean, if we go back just 5 years ago, or actually it's more than that because it's 2000, in the year 2000, so that's 8 years ago, it has been this latest Intifada and whatever it is now. But we see that the Palestinians have changed in their struggle, in the way they are pursuing their aspiration for a homeland. But at the same time, even though the Palestinians have changed, you know, Yasser Arafat is not there anymore. Now we have different types of struggle going on. But we see one thing that remained constant, which is the Israeli brutality. It doesn't matter if the Palestinians say yes today. The Israeli policy, it will not. And I think you probably have chronicled this in your book, which is basically what took place in during these last 8 years. Can you just very much summarize for our viewers what these 5 years or 8 years have been, how these 8 years have been for the Palestinian people?
Well, as you know, Hesham, since the advent of the Palestinian Intifada, September 2000, the type of tactics that Israel has used is, on one hand, it is consistent with the type of violence that Israel, the type of violence and state terrorism, if you will, that is consistent with Israel's past policies. However, on the other hand, it differs in the magnitude of that violence. And this is something that I discussed in depth in my book, particularly in the first chapter, where I argued that Israel wanted to send a clear and stern message to the Palestinians that what took place in South Lebanon and the Israeli withdrawal from South Lebanon after the intense pressure of Lebanese resistance in July 2000 will not be repeated in Palestine, will not be repeated in the occupied territories. And Shaul Mufaz in particular, who was who headed the Israeli army at the time, ordered the transfer of large shipments of weapons that Palestinians were not familiar with. Early on, even before the official advent of the Intifada in September, Israel was mentally and physically prepared to crack down on Palestinians like it never did before. And if you look at the numbers of the Second Intifada compared to the First Intifada, if you look at the type of injuries sustained in the Second Intifada compared to the First Intifada, and so forth and so on, you will find an extreme increase in the casualties, in the sort of targets, in the way that people were targeted, in the fact that F-15 and F-16s were utilized early on in the Intifada, a weapon that was not at all used during the First Intifada, and so forth. And this is why it was important that we classify and discuss the Second Intifada as a unique experience in many ways, because of the nature and the brutality of the Israeli occupation, notwithstanding.
Okay. Now, I want to bring us a little... most people know what Israel has done to the Palestinians. Most people, well, let me put it this way. Most of our viewers here know, but most Americans don't know. And one of the things that took place last week is the incident in Jerusalem at the so-called seminary school. And people, the way the media covered that particular incident was that a terrorist walked into this religious school and killed 8 people. Now, when I looked into this school, Ramzy, I found out that this school was actually established back in 1924, and their ideology is that the land of Palestine was God's gift to the Jewish people, and as it says in the Bible, to go into the land of Palestine and actually kill and drive away the people on the land, these people have it in their head that that's their religious duty. And this particular school, Ramzy, is the school that is basically graduating the settlers' leaders in the West Bank, and it goes way back to even the Israeli leaders who committed the atrocities in Deir Yassin and killed 250 people. Most of them, actually all of them, are civilians, are actually indoctrinated in this particular theology that this school teaches to this day. And that particular theology is widespread within the Israeli army, which actually explains the brutality that these people we are in shock when we see what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians and killing these small children, but actually they are not, and because their theology tells them you aren't supposed to do that. How can you negotiate peace or negotiate any sense with people who are driven by theology? This is not politics. This is theology, that they are driven. They think their religious duty is to kill Palestinians, to kill Palestinian children because God told them to do so. How can you handle that, Ramzy?
Well, Hesham, as a journalist, what I look at when I read and report and research in the U.S. media, what I look at is terminology. I look at language. I look at context. For example, in Baroud refugee camp in the Gaza Strip, during the what Israelis themselves have described as a bigger Holocaust, or as a Holocaust in the Gaza Strip, you would find that the media has intentionally and deliberately and consistently put or created a context for all the Israeli attacks that have killed a majority of civilians, mostly children, intentionally tried to remind its readers that Israel is doing what it's doing because Israel is being targeted by Palestinian rockets. And Israel is doing what it's doing because Israel, as a secular democratic state, has the right to defend its own citizens, and so forth and so on. and you would see an image, let's say, of a Palestinian girl being, salvaged from a ruined Palestinian building, and you would read a caption under, some newspaper, whether in Australia or the US or Canada, that would say something like, a Palestinian wounded Palestinian girl found in the wreckage of a Hamas building, and so forth and so on. So you constantly kind of get the impression, even if you lightly and bashfully sympathize with the Palestinian victims, you are constantly told not to be too harsh in your criticism of Israel, because Israel has to do what Israel has to do. So the disagreement would be on the level of the Israeli reprisal, on the level of the Israeli retaliation, as opposed to whether Israel has any legitimacy whatsoever in doing what it's doing. But when I looked at the Jerusalem story, there was absolutely no context. No context whatsoever. The family of the person who supposedly committed the attack were quoted by various newspapers as saying that our son felt really sad for Gaza, and he felt distressed, and thus he went in what the New York Times described in large headlines, a massacre. Again, terminology. Palestinians only massacre Israelis. Israel doesn't massacre Palestinians. Palestinians commit atrocities. Israel defends itself. We might agree on the level of, how far can Israel or should Israel go to defend itself, or we might not agree, but in the final analysis, the fact is, Israel is a legitimate power, and Israel has the right to exercise that power, while Palestinians, no matter what they do, whether they kill civilians, whether they kill soldiers, whether they kill settlers, regardless of what they do, they are condemned, and the kind of terminology that are described or are used to describe their action is unreserved and absolutely horrific. And this is the images that the American audience and American people and various audiences in the Western world, but particularly in the U.S., are constantly confronted with. And that goes back to what you stated earlier, that Palestinians are always left looking like the bad guy. They never have a good legitimate reason of why they should do the things they do. Their story never has a context whatsoever. History only begins when Israel decides history matters. So when Hamas or whomever committed that attack in Jerusalem, history is being told that Palestinians have attacked Israelis. And when Israel attacks Palestinians, history is told that Israel is attacking Palestinians because Palestinians initiated the attack by attacking Israelis first. Numbers are hardly compared, historical contexts are hardly compared, and at the end, the victim becomes the victimizer.
Okay. How many Israelis, to your knowledge, have been killed by these rockets, these homemade steel pipes?
Well, in the last 9 months, one Israeli has been killed, and that was the Israeli the death that supposedly initiated the Israeli attack on the Gaza Strip in recent weeks, that have killed 124 Palestinians.
Okay.
So one in the last 9 months, since the beginning of the Intifada 6 years plus ago, the total number of Israelis that were killed were 12.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Ramzy, we're looking at a picture of a Palestinian holding his son, and I'm sure this picture, his son who's dead, he's like 2 months old, probably, or even probably less than that. And this picture, I guarantee you, if it makes it on the American mainstream media, images will always, like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. This one is probably worth 10 million words. And you probably have seen this picture before. It's where a bearded man holding his infant son who just died, a bullet in his head, while his mother was holding him. And if this had been a Jewish boy, Don't you think that the media will still be singing and dancing of how horrible these Palestinians are to kill this child? But this way, this is a Palestinian child, and it did not even make it to any of the newspapers in the United States, and it only made it to some of the websites on the internet. What is it? What is it that's going to make these images actually be seen by the American public? What is it going to take?
Well, this is the non-official censorship that takes place in America, and if you compare this, for example, to Al Jazeera, and this is why particularly they are not happy with Al Jazeera's performance, because Al Jazeera says things the way they are and present images the way they are. When it comes to Palestinians, there is an extra use of sensibility is employed there. Again, the same issue, the same problem in how the media reports on things. 12 Palestinians killed, maybe not reported at all, and if it's reported, you will find it buried somewhere in the 6th or 7th page on the New York Times. 3 Israelis killed, their death will be headlined, and it would be a massacre. The kind of imagery, the kind of pictures that are affiliated, the kind of text that is affiliated with that imagery is inconsistent, and it's imbalanced. Another good example was recently, prior to the attacks on Gaza, 3 Palestinians were killed while picnicking near their farm in a town called Beit Lahia in the northern Gaza Strip. It was reported on in various media. Of course, what was reported is that Palestinians claim that they were picnicking. Palestinians alleged that they were picnicking, and they claimed so and so, and they added such and such. The kind of picture that they used with the reporting on the death of 3 picnicking civilians was that of an Israeli army investigator carrying one of those Al-Qassam rockets that fell in an empty field near Sderot. And underneath the picture it says a rainy death. An Israeli army investigator holds an empty rocket, etc. I read the entire article. That rocket did not result in any deaths. The image was fraud. The caption was fraud, and the image accompanied an article that is talking about the death of 3 poor Palestinian farmers resting after a hard day at work and picnicking near their farm in Beit Lahia. It just again comes to give you an example how Palestinian sources. I'm not sure if you noticed, but never, not once, has a Palestinian death have ever been reported as a matter of fact. It's always Palestinian sources said or claimed or so forth and so on. When it comes to Israeli deaths, it's a matter of fact. It happened as if the journalist was there and as if he was taking pictures and he was counting bodies. So we are constantly trying to push against this propaganda, against this shallow context that they constantly provide, and it leads to people leaving with the wrong idea and the wrong impression. How do we do that? Luckily, we have your show. We have numerous websites. We have I have PalestineChronicle.com. We have so many alternatives online. We don't have as much access as the mainstream media does, but I think it's a worthy battle, and we need to keep battling it on until people get the right ideas and be left with the right impressions of what in fact is taking place in Palestine.
Okay. Now, let's talk. You mentioned Al Jazeera, and you are as a former producer with Al Jazeera. Now we have Al Jazeera in English. Now, you mentioned that Al Jazeera in Arabic shows a lot of these pictures. Now, Al Jazeera in English, I noticed that their coverage is a little, well, actually, it's a lot different than Al Jazeera in Arabic. Why is that? Why is Al Jazeera in English is a little shy from telling the truth the way it is?
I agree with you, and I don't think they are a little shy. I think they are very shy from doing that. And I think the reason that this is happening is that, remember, at the end of the day, Al Jazeera reporters in Arabic are Arabs. There are Palestinians, Lebanese, Jordanians, Egyptians, and so forth and so on. And they are people who have lived in a media environment that was constantly tilting in favor of Israel. So naturally, they try to kind of refocus the picture, if you will. When it comes to Al Jazeera English, they are mostly from the BBC, they are from ITV, they are from Channel 4 in London, they are from CNN and so forth. Yes, they are supposedly renegade journalists. They are supposedly more balanced because, they are not told to be otherwise. But they also have something to prove, and they want to prove that Al Jazeera can be as effective and as competitive and as, if you will, mainstream as the rest of the media. And I think the self-censorship, and I do think it is self-censorship as opposed to a state-sponsored censorship or imposed censorship, this self-censorship has kind of led to Al Jazeera English not living up to the expectations. Add to that that there is a great deal of fear that if Al Jazeera English, which of course will have English viewership, ended up being as extreme, as straight and open about its images and its photos and its reports as Al Jazeera Arabic.
What you are telling me as a journalist yourself, that they are accommodating, and a journalism organization or a television organization of that caliber should not be accommodating, should just tell it the way it is. And Al Jazeera pride itself on telling it the way it is. But what I'm hearing from you is that they are accommodating.
Yes, they are accommodating, and I do remember being part of various debates back in Qatar over this particular issue. Of course, I can't give names or detail events, but that was a very important and prominent discussion that was constantly played at Al Jazeera, which is how different or how similar are we going to be. There was a particular interview in the British Guardian that I was personally offended by, where a person who was affiliated with Al Jazeera English was asked, are you going to show as, the graphic images that Al Jazeera Arabic shows? And he says, no. Unlike these people, he said, our view of life and death is different. And I highlighted the word those people, and I raised a storm over it. So I kind of felt that no matter how open-minded a journalist from the BBC or CNN can be, certain things just simply cannot be changed. And I felt that we are certainly going to have a problem trying to narrate the story as efficiently and as courageously as Al Jazeera Arabic has. For the sake of fairness, they are doing a lot better job than much of the mainstream media in Al Jazeera in the U.S., but not quite what we were expecting, as far as being straightforward and being uncompromising about it.
Okay, very good. Ramzy, stay with me. We're going to go to the phones, and we are with John on line one. Go ahead, John.
Okay.
Turn down your TV, please.
Yes, I've muted it. Doctor, I am absolutely impressed. It is delightful to see an educated man talk about an extremely, what one has to view in the historical record as a nonsensical situation, because the Palestinian people have suffered very deeply. But I want to highlight the absurdity of this situation, and I like to go back into the real ancient culture. My background is in ancient languages, Semitic and Indo-European, from Ohio State University and Oxford University in Oxford, England. The Jewish high god Yahweh was a Canaanite war god. As is well known, the ancient name for Palestine was Philistia. They used for their generic name for God was El, which is, we see this in Ugaritic, we see it in Canaanite. So here we have the absurdity supposedly what the Jewish people are using for this ignorant, theocratic, ideological foolishness, because they did go and misappropriate another people's land. Naturally, there would be hard feelings. But isn't it ironic that the very God that they think they're serving was actually a pagan, from their point of view, a pagan, Canaanite, Philistine God, war God.
Okay.
And I
John,
mentioned that just
do you have a question?
to give the
Do you have a question for Ramzy?
Now, if you would like to make a comment to that, then I want to get into economics.
I'll tell you what, why don't you ask your questions and we will comment on it, me or Ramzy will comment on it.
Okay, that goes back to the absurdity of fighting over gods when we're living in an advanced technical society. But my real purpose is, my concern, if there's any time the American people need the genius of the Semitic mind, all commerce began in the city of Babylon with an astronomical mathematical priesthood, the notion of interest, all of our commercial activity. Nothing has changed in 40 centuries. With a $10 trillion debt, what in the hell are we going to do as a society?
Okay.
And that is, I like, because you obviously have economic awareness, and I would like to see that we do not need to be fighting over foolish religious nonsense when this society, and if there's any time we need the Semitic mind, the genius of commercial transactions, trade, all of that has its origin, as you well know, in the Middle East. And I would just be interested in a man with an international perspective and a global perspective, what comments you say. Now, I would hang up and I will be listening to you. Thank you very much for your contribution to our community.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, John. Ramzy, any comments on that?
I do agree with John's notion, and thank you, John. As far as the what will the American people do after all of this debt and this debacle that the Bush administration have got us into, I think this is perhaps the first time in many years of U.S. conflicts overseas where we are no longer talking about the kind of conflict that we as people have to care about from purely moralistic point of view, and rather we have to see ourselves, or Americans have to see themselves, as people who are going to be affected and are already affected by the harm of those conflicts. We are no longer saying, pay attention to Palestinians because they are being mistreated by Israel that is using American weapons and using American billions of American dollars. We are no longer saying, Americans, you have to take a stance because if you don't, we have to discuss the issue from an ethical point of view. We are dealing here with something that is going to touch and is already touching so many Americans, and it's going to affect their economy, and it already has.
Okay.
And as a result, I think the issue here and the discussion is a collective issue, and it's a collective discussion. And indeed, at one point, it will be a collective plight. A plight that doesn't only touch Iraqis and doesn't only touch Palestinians, but touches Americans as well.
Okay. Now, I want to go back to the Jerusalem incident, Ramzy, because, and with John's phone call, it brings it up more and more. Why aren't, if the American media and Western media, they're not going to expose what that school is all about, that it's actually a training camp for terrorists, and as we know that most of these people who graduate from there, they end up leading settlers in the West Bank to kill Palestinians and drive them off their land, because that's what they believe that God wanted them to do. This has nothing to do with politics. You can negotiate with Israel as long as you want to, but you cannot negotiate with the theology of Israel, which this school has graduated thousands and thousands of people who graduated from there. They are either rabbis or they are officers in the military, in the Israeli military, or they are in public life. These people are all over Israel, where more than one half of the Israeli society actually believes in this God's gifts to them. And how do you negotiate with that mindset? I mean, you are trying to tell them that, hey, you need to leave Palestine or the Palestinians alone, but they're telling you that, hey, God told us that we need to kill these people to drive them off the land. Where do you even start negotiating with these people?
Well, I really don't think that there is negotiations to begin with, and any negotiations that is not based on equality and it's not based on the negation of the racist principles of Zionism is a farce. Is a complete waste of time. This is what we have been saying all of these years, and history has proved us right every time. The problem with, if there is anything called negotiations going on, is that it is the negotiation between the master and the slave. Israel has conditions and the Palestinians have to comply, or otherwise their life is going to be turned into a living hell, or they are going to be denied certain financial compensations that they were promised by this country or that state, or they will be given a hard time by Dr. Condoleezza Rice and their ilk. This is the problem that we have been having. There has really been never an even-handed, equitable, just, fair negotiations with the involvement of honest, fair brokers out there. It has always been some sort of an imposition. You do that, otherwise this is what will happen to you. And this is why Palestinians, in my opinion, should have never negotiated in the first place, unless the negotiations were predicated on just principles.
Okay, Ramzy, I had to cut you off, but my point, I wasn't really talking about the negotiations that's going on now or has been going on since 93. What I'm talking about is, even if the government of Israel, even if Olmert and his government says, okay, we are going to go with the two-state solution that was envisioned by President Bush, except, he didn't know that he meant Gaza and the West Bank two-state solutions. But even if the government of Israel wants to negotiate and wants to give anything, these people, these extremists who are, that's not the only school in Jerusalem or throughout what's called Israel now, teaching that particular theology that was the brainchild of Abraham Cook, who very much started this movement back in 1924. My point is, even if there is room for negotiation, these people believe that they are the God's will, and God told them that the only way they are going to redeem themselves is if they kill the Palestinians and remove them off the land. That's how these people. So you can't really negotiate. You can't really. What else can you do with these people? If negotiations is, that's it. I mean, it's God. You cannot negotiate with somebody who says we are speaking for God. And God is telling us the only way we are going to redeem ourselves is if we kill those Palestinians. Because that's, by the way, that's their theology. This particular school teaches that theology. This was not like an innocent religious school where people might think, you have little monks running around. No, you have terrorists running around who will go out and kill Palestinians because it's their religious duties. Where do you go from there?
Well, I think it's even worse than that, Hisham. I think, someone would argue, but wait a minute, every community, every society, every country has its own bunch of lunatics, if you will, extremists who...
But this is half of the country, Ramzy.
But the problem in Israel is that the fact is the Knesset itself, the Israeli parliament itself, the Israeli curricula themselves, the Israeli mindset is predicated on racism, on the rejection of others. According to a recent poll published in Israel, Haaretz, over 50%, I think 64% of Israelis said that they are not willing to live next to an Arab neighbor. Most Israelis would like to see their Palestinian population sent somewhere else. The fact is, these people are not the minority. The fact is, these people are very much the collective expression of the Israeli lifestyle and the Israeli type of thinking, and that's what makes it extremely difficult.
So not having peace in the Middle East and Israel not having peace with its neighbors has nothing really to do with the Palestinians or the Arabs, but it has a lot to do with the Israelis themselves, because as you said, the Knesset, these people are in the policy-making, decision-making positions in the Knesset and throughout the Israeli government. What's his name? The one who just resigned, Friedman? He is of that mindset. I think he was the strategic minister or something, minister of strategy or whatever. He is of that mindset. So the Israeli government is of that mindset. But most people in the world, even the Arabs, most Arabs don't know that you really have no room. You cannot negotiate with people who think they take their orders from God.
That's correct. And in fact, recently, the Shas party has threatened to pull out of the coalition government of Ehud Olmert if Olmert does not approve of the expansion of another illegal settlement in East Jerusalem. And of course, Olmert agreed to the expansion in negation of his own agreement recently that there will be no more expansion of illegal settlements. And of course, as you know, all settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem are illegal. But the point is, these people have bargaining power. They are part and parcel of Israeli society. They are part and parcel of the army, of the government, of the state, of the politics and the policies. And they are much more powerful here in the U.S. They are much more influential here in the U.S. They have all kinds of ties, all sorts of dealings with various radical groups here in America, and also they have all sorts of dealings with fundamentalist Christian groups here in the U.S. And because of that, they are very powerful and they are very effective. And again, it really goes back to my original point: is you cannot expect an equitable and fair dealings of any sort, negotiation or any other, with someone who does not recognize you as an equal partner or recognize your existence altogether, or the fact that you should even be there. And that's what makes this a lot trickier, to say it lightly, than it may seem.
Okay. Now, the book again is the Second Intifada, which can you very much summarize what you actually do in that book, like some of the chapters? What is it exactly that you I know you're taking the Second Intifada, and almost every chapter has like a different subject, but tell our viewers very much what to expect in that book.
Well, this book, Hisham, wasn't written after the event. This book was written during and sometimes prior to the events. So unlike a stock market analyst, I did not wait for the crash to come and say, well, if you asked me prior, I would have told you so and so. The book was written as the Intifada. In fact, before the Intifada started, I began writing the book expecting something to happen, and I detailed the events of the Intifada as they happened. But the context that I used to detail the events of the Intifada is an entirely different context that you would run into in the New York Times or any newspaper here in the U.S. I humanized the Palestinian people. I depicted them the way they are. I did not buy into slogans. I did not buy into preset notions, but rather try to explain why, as a collective, they did and they are doing what they are doing. I was also critical of many things, actually, within the internal Palestinian dynamics, within the Palestinian Authority and other things. I discussed the issue of suicide bombings at length. I was somewhat criticized for that discussion, but not always. I really tried to use a new language and a new outlook on how the Intifada is chronicled and should be remembered in the future.
Okay. Now, I want to go back a little bit to actually kind of spring ahead to the future. with this particular movement, the religious movement in Israel, I remember late 80s and early 90s, the peace movement was the probably overwhelming, has overwhelming influence in the Israeli society. But now I see this religious movement has that kind of influence. And after the incident in Jerusalem, I've read a lot of comments from Jews all over the world, not just Jews in Israel proper. And I find that a lot of them now are calling for revenge. And do you see the future that this particular movement in Israel and within the Jewish communities throughout the world gaining influence and becoming stronger and stronger? And if it is, how is this future going to look for the Middle East and the world?
Well, to begin with, Hesham, I think that these groups are already strong and already rooted in Israeli society. Whether through their religious institutions, through the massive fundings that they receive, or through Israeli politics, the Knesset, the parliament, and the fact that they hold a great deal of sway over public opinion, thus constantly manage to manipulate, if that's the correct term, Israeli politics, even if they do not dominate the politics. So the fact is, they do influence Israeli society, and they do influence the government, and they do influence the army in particular. In other words, and unlike what Israeli media is claiming, that these people are preparing for revenge, the revenge is already taking place. The fact that 125 Palestinians were killed in Gaza in 7 days is in fact the type of revenge that these kind of groups, would push for and would cheer for. The fact that it's done by a soldier wearing a uniform, it doesn't make much difference. The fact is that soldier is really influenced more or less by that type of policies and by that type of theology. So we don't really need to wait for a couple of religious students from Jerusalem to go and gun down few Palestinians at some market to pinpoint to that revenge. I think Israeli policies in general terms are a reflection of that racist mentality that these groups hold.
Very good. And with that, Ramzy, we are coming to the conclusion of our program. I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming on the program. It has been an honor and a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, last week one of the callers had very much said that I should be talking about the school, the shootings in Jerusalem, and I said, well, you know what? Yes, I did talk about it, and I even condemned it. And until today, I still condemn that killing at that religious school, even though that school is nothing but a terrorist camp, terrorist training camp. If you know anything about these illegal settlers in Palestine, these, you really cannot reason and you cannot win with these people, because these people are extremists. You think about Muslim extremists, but these people put Muslim extremists to shame, because these people think, and this is their theology. Now listen to this. Listen to this. Pay attention, because it's funny. At the same time, it's scary that one day some of these people will be in power in Israel. Now, they are in power now, but I'm talking about like having 100% say-so in the government of Israel. These people believe that the whole world, this is their theology, that God gave them, now by the way, this theology started in 1924, that God gave them the land as a gift. These people believe that they are not like all the other humans, that they are special, that they were chosen by God because they are special, they are holy. And their theology is supposed to redeem this whole world, and is going to be a universal religion where everybody after that lives in harmony, after they kill everybody else, of course. But these people are extremists who they want to impose their religious doctrine on everybody else. They want to kill, and they they really, if you read some of their writings, now they are all over the Israeli army, because if you are wondering why that little child took a bullet in his head while he is in the arms of his mother, and the guy who killed him was laughing because of that, they think they are doing God's will. They think they are doing what God wants them to do, is to kill these people off the land. Read it in the Bible. You can see that. They think that they are with Joshua crossing the river Jordan to go and smite the enemy and remove them off the land and kill them. Number one, they don't think they are human. They are superior to humans. Go read their literature. You will see that these people are extremists. These are Jewish extremists who very much, it's an extremist society, because even those that you call a Muslim extremist, very few, and they can't even come close to what these people are thinking. So this Palestinian went into that school, shot these 8 future terrorists, okay? And the media said a Palestinian terrorist went and shot and killed 8 students. I heard that on the radio. And you think they're little children, but read what that school is all about. Read what that theology is all about. Learn extremism in Judaism, and you will see that what we have told you here is the truth and nothing but the truth. See you next Thursday, 8 o'clock. Go do the right thing.